The dust swirled up from Main Street like a biblical plague, coating everything in Wyoming territory with a fine layer of grit that worked its way into every crevice of body and soul. Clara May pressed her back against the rough wooden post outside her father's general store, trying to make herself invisible as Jonas May's voice boomed across the street. $20, her father bellowed, his face red as a prairie sunset. That's all she's worth to me. Feed her, clothe her for 22 years. And what do I get, a spinster daughter who can't even catch a husband? The crowd that had gathered outside Pike's saloon murmured with a mixture of amusement and disgust. Clara felt her cheeks burn hotter than the August sun beating down on the dusty town of Bitter Creek. She'd known this day would come. Her father had threatened it often enough, but somehow she'd never truly believed he would go through with it. Come now, Jonas. Harlan Pike stepped out from his saloon, wiping his meaty hands on a stained apron. The saloon owner's eyes glinted as they traveled over Clara's form, making her skin crawl. $20 seems a bit steep for damaged goods. She's past her prime. Ain't been able to snare a man yet. What makes you think she's worth that much to me? She can cook, clean, and she's got all her teeth. Jonas spat tobacco juice into the street. More than you can say for most of the women in your establishment. Clara's hands clenched into fists at her sides. She wanted to run, to scream, to fight, but where would she go? The vast prairie stretched endlessly in every direction, and a woman alone out there was as good as dead. Her mother had died birthing her younger brother, leaving Clara to raise him until he'd run off to join a cattle drive 2 years back. Now it was just her and Jonas, and apparently she'd outlived her usefulness. I'll give you 15, Pike countered, pulling a wad of bills from his vest pocket. And that's being generous, considering I'll have to train her up proper. The crowd laughed at that. Rough men who spent their days breaking horses and their nights breaking bottles over each other's heads. Clara recognized most of them cowboys, railroad workers, drifters who passed through Bitter Creek on their way to somewhere else. Not one of them would lift a finger to help her. 15 and a jug of that good whiskey you keep in the back, Jonas said, extending his hand. Clara's vision blurred with unshed tears. This was it, then. Her life reduced to a monetary transaction. Her future decided by 2 men who saw her as nothing more than property to be bartered. She thought of her mother, dead these 10 years, and wondered if this was the fate that awaited all women in this God-forsaken territory. Pike grinned, revealing yellowed teeth. Deal, though I want to inspect the merchandise first. He started toward Clara, and she shrank back against the post. The crowd parted to let him through, their faces a mixture of pity and cruel entertainment. Pike reached out one thick finger to lift her chin, and Clara jerked her head away. Feisty, Pike chuckled. I'll have to break that spirit quick enough. You'll do no such thing. The voice came from the edge of the crowd, low and steady as distant thunder. Everyone turned to see a man leading a pack mule loaded with pelts. He was tall, lean in the way of men who lived hard and ate sparse, with dark hair that needed cutting and a beard that had seen better days. His clothes were worn leather and rough homespun, marked with the dust of long trails and the pine resin of mountain camps. This ain't your concern, stranger, Jonas said, squinting at the newcomer. This is between me and Pike here. The man, he couldn't have been more than 30, tied his mule to the hitching post with deliberate slowness. When he turned back to face them, Clara saw eyes the color of winter sky, cold and clear. Ethan Boone, he said, as if that name should mean something. And I'm making it my concern. How much for the woman? Pike bristled. We already got a deal. Mountain Man, $15 and a jug of whiskey. You can't match that. Ethan walked to his mule and untied one of the bundles. Prime beaver pelts spilled out, their dark fur gleaming in the sunlight. The crowd murmured appreciatively beaver was getting scarce, and these were quality furs. These pelts will fetch $40 at the trading post. Ethan said quietly, maybe more if the buyer's smart enough to recognize quality. That's what I'm offering for her freedom. Jonas's eyes went wide with greed. $40 for her. Not for her, Ethan corrected, his gaze never leaving Clara's face. For her freedom. There's a difference. Pike stepped forward, hand moving toward the pistol at his hip. Now wait just a minute. Ethan's hand dropped to his own weapon, a well-worn Colt that had seen its share of use. You got something to say? Pike. The saloon owner's face darkened, but he knew better than to draw on a man who lived by the gun in the wilderness. Mountain men were a different breed, half wild, unpredictable, and deadly when crossed. This is robbery. Pike growled. We had a deal. You had an agreement to buy a human being. Ethan said, I'm offering a better price for her freedom. That's business, not robbery. Clara watched this exchange with growing bewilderment. She'd never seen this man before, had no idea why he would spend what must be months of trapping work on her behalf. Men didn't do things like that without expecting something in return. Jonas looked between Pike and Ethan, clearly torn between his original deal and the lure of more money. Finally, greed won out. $40, you said? Ethan nodded, pulling the bundle of pelts forward. Tom Bridger at the trading post will give you fair value. Tell him I sent you. And what about my whiskey? Jonas whined. You'll have to buy your own with all that money, Ethan said dryly. The transaction was completed quickly. Jonas eager to get his hands on the furs before the stranger changed his mind. Pike stormed back into his saloon, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. The crowd began to disperse, the show over, though many cast curious glances at Clara and her unexpected savior. Well, Jonas said, hefting the bundle of pelts. She's your problem now. Boone, don't come crying to me when you realize what a waste of good furs that was. He didn't even look at Clara as he walked away, heading straight for the trading post. 22 years of raising her, and he discarded her without a backward glance. Clara felt something break inside her chest, a final severing of whatever daughterly duties she'd still harbored. Ethan stood quietly, giving her space to process what had just happened. Finally, he spoke. I've got supplies to pick up at Bridger's. After that, I'm heading back to my place in the mountains. You're welcome to come with me, or I can stake you to stage fare to wherever you want to go. Your choice. My choice? Clara's voice came out hoarse. Why would you? What do you want from me? He tilted his head, studying her with those winter sky eyes. Want nothing. I've been where you are, is all. Having your life decided by others, treated like you're less than human. Nobody should have that power over another person. But the pelts that must have been months of work. It was. He shrugged. I can trap more pelts. You can't get back your dignity once it's been sold. Clara looked around the dusty street, at the buildings that had comprised her entire world for 22 years. The schoolhouse where she'd learned her letters until girls weren't welcome anymore. The church where her mother was buried in the yard out back. The store where she'd worked without wages since she could carry a broom. I don't even know you, she said. No, Ethan agreed. And you don't have to come with me. Like I said, I'll pay your way to anywhere the stage runs. Denver, Cheyenne, even back east if that's what you want. But if you're looking to start fresh, my place is quiet. Clean air, clean water. Nobody around for miles to bother you. You could stay until you figure out what comes next. And you'd want nothing. No cooking, no cleaning, no... She couldn't finish the sentence. I've been taking care of myself for 5 years now. Don't need a cook or a maid. As for the other... His jaw tightened. I'm not that kind of man. Miss May, never have been, never will be. Something in his voice, a darkness that spoke of old pain, made Clara believe him. She looked down at herself, her best dress, carefully mended but still showing wear. The only nice thing she owned. Everything else was back at her father's store, and she knew Jonas would sell it all before the day was out. I don't have anything, she said. No clothes, no money, nothing. We'll stop at the Mercantile. Get you what you need for the journey. Ethan glanced at the sun. We should move soon if we want to make camp before dark. The invitation stands either way, come with me, or take the stage fare. But decide soon. Storm's coming in from the west, and I want to be well up the trail before it hits. Clara looked west, where dark clouds gathered on the horizon like an omen. A storm was coming. All right, the question was whether she'd meet it in a place of her own choosing or let it catch her here, where she'd always been nothing more than Jonas May's unsold daughter. She thought of Pike's yellow teeth, of the laughing crowd, of 22 years of being told she was worth less than a jug of whiskey. Then she looked at Ethan Boone, who'd spent a season's work to buy her the one thing no one had ever offered before a choice. "I'll come with you," she said, the words feeling strange and powerful on her tongue. "To your place in the mountains, until I figure out what comes next." Ethan nodded once, as if he'd expected no less. "Then let's get you outfitted proper. Winter comes early in the high country, and you'll need more than that dress to keep warm." As they walked toward the Mercantile, Clara felt the eyes of the town on her back. Let them look, she thought. Let them gossip about Jonas May's spinster daughter running off with a mountain man. Tomorrow, she'd be gone, and Bitter Creek would be nothing but a bad memory fading in the distance. The storm clouds continued to build in the west, but for the first time in her life, Clara May walked toward them unafraid. The Mercantile smelled of leather and coffee beans, a familiar scent that made Clara's chest tight with memory. How many hours had she spent in her father's store, breathing in these same aromas while dreaming of somewhere else, Mrs. Holcomb, the proprietor's wife, stared openly as Ethan led Clara to the shelves of practical clothing. 2 riding skirts, Ethan said, ignoring the woman's scrutiny. 3 shirts, wool if you have them. A coat, something that'll turn the mountain wind. Boots, 2. What size? Miss May. Clara had never owned more than 2 dresses at a time. "I don't—" "Mr. Boone, this is too much." "It's practical," he said simply. "You'll freeze in what you're wearing. And it's Ethan— Mr. Boone was my father." "Mrs.?" Holcomb sniffed disapprovingly as she pulled items from the shelves. "Heard what happened outside Pike's. Your father must be spinning in his grave. Clara May, running off with a stranger like some common—" "Ma'am." Ethan's voice was quiet, but carried an edge sharp as winter ice. "The lady's making purchases. That's all you need to concern yourself with." The older woman's mouth snapped shut, though her eyes remained hostile. Clara selected clothes quickly, choosing sturdy over pretty, function over form. When Ethan added wool stockings, a broad-brimmed hat, and leather gloves to the pile, she didn't protest. He was right, she knew nothing about surviving in the mountains. They left town as the sun reached its zenith, Ethan's mule now carrying supplies instead of furs. Clara walked beside him, unused to the weight of the new boots, the swing of the divided skirt that allowed for a longer stride. Behind them, Bitter Creek grew smaller with each step, until it was just another smudge on the vast canvas of the prairie. "We'll make 15 miles today," Ethan said, checking the storm clouds that seemed to follow them west. "There's a grove of cottonwoods where we'll camp. Tomorrow we start the climb." Clara nodded, saving her breath. The walking was harder than she'd expected, the trail rough and ascending. By the 3rd mile, her feet burned with new blisters. By the 5th, her legs shook with exhaustion. She'd spent her life on her feet, but standing behind a store counter was different from hiking across untamed country. Ethan glanced back, taking in her flushed face and labored breathing. Without a word, he stopped and adjusted the mule's load, creating a small space. "Ride for a while," he said. "I can walk." "I know you can, but there's no shame in resting when you need to. We've got a long way to go." Pride warred with practicality. Practicality won. Clara let him help her onto the mule's back, grateful for the relief even as embarrassment heated her cheeks. She'd been raised to be useful, to never be a burden. Now here she was, already slowing him down. "Thank you," she managed. Ethan just nodded and resumed walking, leading the mule with practiced ease. They traveled in companionable silence, the only sounds the creak of leather, the mule's steady breathing, and the whisper of wind through the sparse grass. As the miles passed, Clara found herself studying her unexpected savior. He moved like part of the landscape, each step sure and economical. His hands on the lead rope were scarred but gentle, and he spoke to the mule occasionally in a low, soothing voice. Everything about him seemed deliberate, controlled, as if he'd learned to pare away all unnecessary motion and emotion. "How long have you lived in the mountains?" she asked as the sun began its western descent. 5 years, give or take. "Alone?" "Yes." The finality in that single word told her not to push further. They reached the cottonwood grove as the first fat raindrops began to fall. Ethan worked quickly, stringing a canvas tarp between trees and building a fire pit ringed with stones. His movements were efficient, practiced, speaking of countless nights spent making camp in wild places. "Can you tend the fire while I see to the mule?" he asked. Clara nodded, grateful for a task. She'd built more fires than she could count, though never outdoors like this. Soon she had a small blaze crackling, the smoke rising to mingle with the gathering storm clouds. Ethan returned with an armload of additional wood. "Good fire," he said, and Clara felt absurdly pleased by the simple praise. He produced a blackened coffee pot and skillet from the mule's packs, along with bacon, beans, and hard biscuits. Clara reached for the provisions, falling back on familiar ground. "I can cook," she offered, "if you'll let me." "If you want to, but you don't have to. Like I said, I've been taking care of yourself for 5 years. Clara finished. "I know, but I'd like to. It's something I'm good at." He studied her for a moment, then handed over the supplies. While she cooked, he completed the camp preparations, his movements unhurried despite the approaching storm. By the time the beans were bubbling and the bacon sizzling, he'd created a snug shelter that would keep them dry through the night. They ate as the storm broke overhead, rain drumming on the canvas above them. The fire hissed and sparked but stayed lit, testament to Clara's skill in building it. She surprised herself by eating heartily. The mountain air and long walk had awakened an appetite that years of scrimping at her father's table had suppressed. "Good meal," Ethan said, setting aside his empty plate. "Thank you. It's just bacon and beans." It's hot food on a cold night. That's something to be grateful for. Thunder rolled across the prairie, and Clara shivered despite the fire's warmth. The storm seemed bigger out here, unfiltered by buildings and the illusion of civilization. Lightning illuminated the grove in stark flashes, turning the cottonwoods into skeletal giants. "Are you afraid?" Ethan asked quietly. Clara considered lying, then decided against it. "Yes, I've never been this far from town, never been nowhere. Fear's not a bad thing. Keeps you careful, keeps you alive. But you're safe here. The trees will break the wind, the tarp will turn the rain, and the fire will last till morning." "How can you be sure?" "Because I've done this more nights than I can count, because I know what I'm doing, and because—" He paused, seeming to weigh his words. "Because I gave you my word that you'd be safe with me. I don't give my word lightly." Something in his tone made Clara look at him more closely. In the firelight, she could see lines carved by sun and wind, a small scar along his jaw, eyes that held depths she couldn't fathom. This was a man who'd chosen solitude, who'd retreated to the mountains for reasons she didn't yet understand. Yet he'd given up months of work to buy her freedom. "Why did you really do it?" she asked. "The pelts that was your whole season's work, wasn't it?" Ethan was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Finally, he spoke, his voice barely audible above the rain. My wife was Cheyenne. Sarah Walking Cloud. Smartest woman I ever knew. Could track better than me. Shoot straighter, too. We had a little girl, Emma. She had her mother's eyes and my stubborn streak. Clara's heart clenched at the past tense. What happened? Cholera. Took them both in the span of 3 days. I was out hunting, trying to find fresh meat to help them get stronger. By the time I got back, he trailed off, lost in memory. The missionaries who'd been treating them said it was God's will. Said maybe it was better, that a mixed-blood child would have a hard life anyway. The bitterness in his voice could have curdled milk. Clara understood now why he lived alone, why he'd reacted so strongly to her situation in town. He knew what it was like to be powerless, to have others decide your worth. After that, I couldn't stay in civilized places. Couldn't stand the hypocrisy, the cruelty dressed up as righteousness. So I went to the mountains, found a place where the only laws are the ones nature makes. It's hard living, but it's honest. And today in town, saw your father bartering you like livestock, saw Pike looking at you like prey, saw all those good Christian folks standing around enjoying the show. He shook his head. Couldn't walk away. Sarah would have skinned me alive if I had. She never could abide seeing anyone treated as less than human. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. This man had spent everything to help her, not because he wanted something, but because his lost wife would have expected it of him. It was perhaps the most honest thing anyone had ever told her. I'm sorry, she said, about your family. It was 5 years ago. The sharp edges have worn down some, though the shape of the loss remains. He added another log to the fire, sending sparks spiraling up into the darkness. What about you, your mother? Died when I was 12. Childbed fever after my brother was born. I raised Samuel myself, practically, until he ran off to join a cattle drive. Haven't heard from him in 2 years. Clara pulled her knees up to her chest. Father always blamed me for her death. Said if I'd been more help around the house, she wouldn't have had to work so hard while carrying Samuel. That's fool talk. Childbed fever takes who it takes. I know that, but knowing and feeling are different things. She watched the fire dance. I've been trying to earn my keep ever since, trying to prove I was worth the food I ate and the space I took up. Then today he sold me like I was nothing. 22 years of trying, and I was worth less than a jug of whiskey. You're worth more than $40 in pelts, too, Ethan said firmly. A person's worth isn't measured in what someone else will pay for them. It's measured in who they are, what they do, how they treat others. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the storm rage overhead. Despite the violence of the weather, Clara felt oddly peaceful. For the first time in years, someone had seen her as a person rather than a commodity. It was a gift more valuable than any amount of beaver pelts. Tell me about your place, she said eventually. What's it like? A small smile ghosted across Ethan's features. It's a valley about 3 days' ride from here. There's a year-round stream fed by mountain runoff. Meadows that bloom with wildflowers in summer. Good timber all around. I built the cabin myself, nothing fancy, but it's solid. Got a root cellar, a smokehouse, even a small barn for the mule and the horse. You have a horse? Mare named Sage. Traded for her last year. She's got mountain sense. Knows the trails better than I do sometimes. He stretched his legs toward the fire. The cabin's only half finished inside. I laid the floors and built the fireplace, but the walls are still rough timber. Never saw the point in prettying it up just for myself. It sounds perfect, Clara said softly. A place that's yours, that no one can take away. That's the idea. Nobody to answer to but yourself and the seasons. He glanced at her. It's isolated, though. The nearest neighbor is a day's ride, and town is 3 days. Winter means being snowed in for weeks at a time. It's not an easy life. Neither was the one I left behind. No, he agreed. I suppose it wasn't. The storm was beginning to pass, the thunder growing distant. Clara yawned despite herself. the day's events catching up with her. Ethan noticed and pulled blankets from the packs. "You take the spot nearest the fire," he said. "I'll sleep here by the entrance." Clara wanted to protest, to say she didn't need special treatment, but exhaustion won out. She made a bed of pine needles and spread her blanket, still amazed that she was here, miles from everything she'd known, trusting her life to a man she'd met only hours before. As she settled in, Ethan spoke once more. "Miss May, that choice I offered you in town, it stands. Come morning, if you've changed your mind, I'll take you back. No hard feelings, no questions asked." Clara pulled the blanket up to her chin. "I won't change my mind." "How can you be sure?" She thought about it, about the fear and excitement warring in her chest, about the vast unknown stretching ahead. "Because for the first time in my life, someone asked me what I wanted instead of telling me, 'That's worth whatever comes next.'" Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Get some rest. We've got a long climb tomorrow." Clara closed her eyes, listening to the dying rain and the crackle of the fire. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, wild and free. For the first time in memory, she fell asleep without dreading what morning would bring. The third day of climbing brought them to Ethan's valley just as the afternoon sun painted the peaks gold. Clara, perched on the mule after another bout of altitude sickness, gasped at the sight. The valley opened before them like a secret, cradled between pine-covered slopes with a silver stream threading through its heart. "There," Ethan said quietly, pointing to a structure near the tree line. "Home." The cabin was exactly as he'd described, solid, practical, unfinished, built from logs chinked with mud and moss. It seemed to grow from the landscape rather than impose upon it. A stone chimney rose from one end, and real glass windows caught the late sunlight. It was modest, even rough, but to Clara it looked like salvation. "It's beautiful," she breathed. Ethan glanced at her with surprise. "It's just a cabin." "It's a home nobody can take away from you. That makes it beautiful." They approached slowly, and a gray mare emerged from behind the cabin, whinnying a greeting. Sage, Clara realized, watching as the horse trotted up to nuzzle Ethan's shoulder. "Yes, girl, I'm back," he murmured, producing something from his pocket that the mare lipped up eagerly. "And I brought company. Mind your manners." While Ethan tended to the animals, Clara stood before the cabin, suddenly uncertain. For 3 days, she'd focused on the journey, on putting one foot in front of the other. Now, faced with the reality of this choice, doubt crept in. What was she doing here? What did she expect to happen? "Second thoughts?" Ethan asked, appearing at her elbow. "Third and fourth thoughts," Clara admitted. I don't know how to live like this." "Neither did I when I started." He lifted her pack from the mule. "Come on, let's get you settled." The cabin's interior was a single large room with a loft accessed by a ladder. The promised fireplace dominated one wall, stones carefully fitted and mortared. The floor was smooth planks, swept clean, and the log walls were intact but unfinished, as he'd said. Furniture was minimal: a table and 2 chairs, a shelf holding dishes and supplies, a trunk in the corner. "Lofts for sleeping," Ethan explained. "I'll bunk down here by the fire. There's a necessary out back, and the stream's just through those trees for washing. Root cellars around the side, and the smokehouse." "Mr. Boone Ethan." Clara set down her bundle. "This is your home. I can't just—" "Where will you put me?" He looked genuinely puzzled. "Put you? You're not a piece of furniture. Miss May, you'll stay here until you decide what comes next. That was the agreement. But for how long, days, weeks, I need to know what you expect." Ethan removed his hat, running fingers through his travel-matted hair. "I expect nothing. Stay a day, a month, through winter if you need to. When you're ready to leave, I'll take you to town and stake you to whatever comes next. Until then, you're a guest." "Guests don't earn their keep," Is that what's bothering you, that you'll owe me? He shook his head. I told you those pelts already paid for your freedom. Everything else is just neighboring, and neighbors help each other out here. It's how people survive. Clara wanted to argue further, but exhaustion weighed her down like stones. The altitude, the long journey, the emotional upheaval of leaving everything she'd known, it all crashed over her at once. You're dead on your feet, Ethan observed. Let me heat some water for washing, then you can rest. Tomorrow's soon enough to figure out the details. While Clara washed the trail dust away, Ethan prepared a simple meal. They ate in companionable silence, the cabin warm and snug as night fell. Afterward, he showed her the loft, his own sleeping space. She realized, noting the personal items. I can't take your bed, she protested. You can and you will. I've slept on the ground more nights than I can count. The floor by the fire will be luxury compared to some places I've laid my head. Too tired to argue further, Clara climbed the ladder. The loft was sparse but clean, with a proper mattress stuffed with pine needles and sweetgrass. A small window offered a view of stars through the trees. She fell asleep to the sound of Ethan banking the fire below, movements quiet and careful, trying not to disturb her rest. She woke to sunlight streaming through the window and the smell of coffee brewing. For a moment, disorientation gripped her. Where were the sounds of Bitter Creek waking up? The clatter of wagons, the shouts of merchants, her father's heavy tread on the stairs. Then memory returned, and with it a mixture of fear and exhilaration. She dressed quickly in her new practical clothes and descended the ladder to find Ethan already gone, the coffee pot keeping warm on the hearth. Through the window, she spotted him working on what appeared to be a half-built addition to the cabin. When had he started that? She poured coffee strong and bitter mountain style and ventured outside. Morning, Ethan said without turning around. Sleep well. Better than I have in years. She meant it. What are you building? Thought the cabin could use a separate room. For privacy. He straightened, hammer in hand. Can't be proper. Having an unmarried woman staying in a single room with a man, even if he's sleeping on the floor. Clara felt heat rise in her cheeks. In the scramble to leave town, she hadn't considered propriety. People will talk anyway. A woman living alone with a man in the mountains. Let them talk, but you should have your own space. Somewhere that's yours as long as you're here. The thoughtfulness of it, the matter-of-fact way he set about ensuring her comfort and reputation, made her throat tight. Can I help? Can you handle a saw? I can learn. That set the pattern for their days. Morning coffee, then work on the addition. Ethan was a patient teacher, showing her how to measure twice and cut once, how to fit logs properly, how to chink gaps against the coming winter. Clara's hands blistered, then calloused. Her arms ached, then strengthened. In the afternoons, while Ethan hunted or tended his trap lines, Clara explored the immediate area, learning the paths to the stream, the best spots for kindling, which plants were edible and which to avoid. The mountain woman he'd loved might have known these things instinctively, but Clara had to learn each lesson through trial and error. Evenings they spent by the fire, Ethan teaching her to read the weather signs, to understand animal tracks, to prepare for winter's siege. Sometimes he pulled out a worn book, Shakespeare, surprisingly, and read aloud in his quiet, measured voice. Clara discovered he was educated, had been a teacher before meeting Sarah, before the mountains called him away from civilization's disappointments. Why did you stop teaching? She asked one night as October frost sparkled on the windows. Can't teach what you no longer believe, he said simply. I used to tell children that hard work and good character would see them through, that justice would prevail, that people were essentially good. Then I watched good people stand by while my wife and daughter died. Heard them say it was for the best. He closed the book. Hard to go back to teaching fairy tales after that. Clara understood. Her own faith in fairness had died the day her father put a price on her. Do you ever get lonely? Sometimes, but lonely's better than false company. He glanced at her. Present company accepted. She smiled at that, the first real smile she'd felt in weeks. They developed an easy rhythm. She realized. Comfortable silences, shared labor, quiet evenings. It was more peace than she'd known in her life. The addition was nearly complete when the first snow fell. Clara woke to a world transformed. White and pristine and somehow softer. She dressed quickly and hurried outside to find Ethan already working. Snow dusting his shoulders. "Winter's early this year," he said. "We'll need to finish soon." They worked through the morning, racing the weather. By afternoon, the new room was roofed and chinked. A small but private space with its own window and door connecting to the main cabin. Ethan had even built a simple bed frame, though the mattress would need stuffing. "It's wonderful," Clara said, standing in her new domain. "I don't know how to thank you." No thanks needed. Like I said, just neighboring. But it was more than that, and they both knew it. Somewhere in the weeks of shared work and quiet evenings, something had shifted between them. Not romantic. Exactly the ghost of Ethan's family stood too firmly between them for that. But a friendship, perhaps. A recognition of kindred spirits who'd been broken by life and were slowly learning to heal. That night, as snow continued to fall, Clara made a decision. "I want to stay through winter," she announced over dinner. "If the offer's still open." Ethan looked up from his plate. "It's always open, but you understand what that means. Once the heavy snows come, we're trapped here until spring. No going to town, no leaving if you change your mind." "I understand, but I like it here. The quiet, the work, She gestured helplessly. "The being treated like a person instead of a burden. I'm not ready to give that up." "Then stay." His voice was gruff with some emotion she couldn't name. "Room's yours as long as you want it." They finished the meal in silence, but it was a comfortable quiet, full of unspoken understanding. Outside, the snow continued to fall, sealing them into their mountain sanctuary. Clara thought she should be frightened by the isolation, by being trapped with a man she'd known only weeks. Instead, she felt safe, for the first time in memory, truly safe. Later, in her new room with Osnoram tapping gently at the window, Clara allowed herself to imagine a future. Not forever, she wasn't naive enough to think this arrangement could last indefinitely. But for now, for this winter, she had a place, a purpose, a friend who asked nothing but her company and gave her the greatest gift imaginable, the freedom to choose her own path. Tomorrow there would be more work supplies to organize, meat to preserve, firewood to stack high against the coming cold. But tonight, in a room built by kindness and measured in respect, Clara May slept without fear, without obligation, without the weight of being unwanted. The snow whispered promises against the window of quiet months ahead, of lessons learned and strength gained, of a woman discovering who she might be when no one was telling her she was worthless. And somewhere in the main room, keeping watch through the night, Ethan Boone sat by the fire and remembered what it felt like to not be completely alone. November arrived with a blizzard that howled down from the peaks like a living thing, rattling the windows and piling snow against the cabin walls. Clara woke in the pre-dawn darkness to the sound of wind screaming through the trees, and something else, a rhythmic banging that meant trouble. She dressed quickly and emerged from her room to find Ethan pulling on his coat, face grim in the firelight. "Shed roof's coming loose," he said. "If we lose it, we lose half our winter supplies." "What can I do?" He paused, seeming to weigh the danger against necessity. "I need someone to hold the lantern while I nail the boards back down, but it's dangerous." "I'll do it." They ventured into the storm together, Clara clutching the lantern while Ethan fought to secure the thrashing roof. The wind tried to tear them both away, snow driving horizontally into their faces. Clara's hands went numb around the lantern handle, but she held steady, providing the light Ethan needed to work. A board broke free entirely, spinning away into the darkness. Ethan lunged for it, slipped on the ice, and went down hard. Without thinking, Clara dropped the lantern and grabbed his coat, hauling him back from the shed's edge where a fall would mean broken bones or worse. "The roof," he started. "Can wait," Clara said firmly. "We need to get inside before we freeze." They stumbled back to the cabin, supporting each other against the wind. Once inside, Clara saw blood on Ethan's face where the board had caught him. She pushed him into a chair and fetched water and cloth, ignoring his protests. "Sit still," she ordered, cleaning the cut with gentle efficiency. "You're not invincible, you know." "Never claimed to be," he said, wincing as she worked. "You saved my hide out there." "You saved mine first. Call it even." The cut was shallow but ugly, running from temple to jaw. Clara cleaned it thoroughly, trying not to think about how close it had come to his eye. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked, reaction setting in. "Hey," Ethan said softly, catching her wrist. "I'm all right." "I know, She took a shaky breath. "When you fell, I thought—" "But I didn't. Thanks to you." Their eyes met and held for a moment, something shifting in the space between them. Then Clara cleared her throat and stepped back, suddenly aware of their proximity. "The shed," she said. "Will our supplies survive the night?" "Most of them. We'll assess the damage come morning. Nothing to do now but wait it out." They spent the rest of the night by the fire, listening to the storm rage. Neither slept, too aware of nature's violence just beyond their walls. When dawn finally came, pale and grudging, they ventured out to find the shed partially collapsed, but most supplies salvageable. "Could have been worse," Ethan said, surveying the damage. "Could have been better," Clara countered, already calculating what they'd lost. They worked together to move everything to the barn, which had weathered the storm better. By the time they finished, both were exhausted, but there was satisfaction in having faced the crisis together and survived. That night, Ethan pulled out a bottle he'd been saving. "Medicinal purposes," he said with a rare smile, pouring them each a small measure of whiskey. Clara sipped carefully, feeling the burn chase away the last of the storm's chill. "Is it always like this, the winters?" "Sometimes worse. Nature doesn't care about our plans or preparations. She teaches hard lessons to those who don't respect her. And yet you stay. And yet I stay." He stared into his glass. "After Sarah and Emma died, I thought about ending it all. Seemed easier than carrying the weight of their loss. But then I came here, and the mountain didn't care about my grief. It demanded I work to survive, fight to live each day. That saved me, in a way, gave me purpose when I had none." Clara understood. The mountain demanded everything and gave back only what you earned. There was honesty in that, a brutal fairness that civilization lacked. "Tell me about her," she said quietly. "Sarah, if you want to—" Ethan was silent for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, "She laughed like springtime, even when things were hard. She found reasons to smile, could track a deer through running water, gentle a spooked horse with just her voice. She made everything brighter." "How did you meet—" "Her band wintered near the school where I taught. Some of the children came to learn letters, and she came to watch, curious about the white man's magic marks on paper. I offered to teach her, and she offered to teach me real survival fair trade. She said—" A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Took us about a week to realize we were teaching each other more than skills. Your families must have objected. Mine disowned me. Hers were cautious but fair. I had to prove myself worthy, spent a winter with the band, learning their ways. Sarah's father said if I could survive that, maybe I was strong enough for his daughter." "Were you happy?" 3 years. 3 perfect years. Emma came along in the 2nd year. And suddenly the world made sense in a way it never had before. We had plans: build a real house, maybe start a school for mixed-blood children, bridge two worlds. He drained his glass. Then the sickness came. Clara reached across the table, covering his scarred hand with hers. I'm sorry for bringing up painful memories. They're not all painful, just distant, like it happened to someone else, someone I used to be. He turned his hand palm up, fingers closing gently around hers. What about you ever have someone? Clara laughed bitterly. Who'd want Jonas May's spinster daughter? I had a suitor once, Tom Morrison, the banker's son. Courted me proper for 2 months until his father found out how little dowry I'd have. Ended that quick enough. His loss. Pretty words, Mr. Boone. Truth, Miss May. He squeezed her hand once, then let go. You're worth 10 of any banker's boy who measures people in dowries. The compliment warmed her more than the whiskey. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire burn low. Outside, the wind had finally died, leaving the world muffled in snow. We should get some sleep, Ethan said eventually. Tomorrow we'll need to build a proper shelter for what's left of the supplies. Clara nodded, but didn't immediately move. Ethan, thank you for trusting me to help tonight. Most men would have faced that storm alone rather than risk a woman. You're not just any woman. He paused, seeming to search for words. You're Clara May, who chose the unknown over the familiar. That takes a kind of courage most men don't have. She stood then, touched beyond words. Good night, Ethan. Good night, Clara. In her room, Clara sat on her bed and examined her hands. Calloused now, strong from weeks of hard work. They'd held a lantern steady in a killing storm, hauled a man back from danger, cleaned and tended wounds. They were not the soft hands of a shopkeeper's daughter anymore. Through the wall, she heard Ethan moving about, banking the fire, settling in for the night. Strange how natural it had become, this awareness of another person's presence. In her father's house, she'd felt alone even surrounded by people. Here, in this isolated cabin, she felt connected in ways she couldn't name. The storm had tested them, and they'd survived together. More than survived. They'd discovered something. Trust, perhaps, or the beginning of partnership. Whatever it was, it warmed Clara more than any fire. She lay back, pulling quilts up to her chin. Tomorrow there would be hard work. Repairs and salvage and preparation for the next storm. But tonight, she was safe and warm, and she realized with surprised content. Through her small window, stars appeared between breaking clouds. Clara watched them wheel slowly across the sky and thought about courage and choices, about storms weathered and hands held, about a man who'd lost everything and a woman who'd never had anything to lose. Somewhere in the main room, she heard Ethan cough softly, a human sound in the mountain silence. It was enough to know he was there, keeping watch as he always did. Clara closed her eyes and slept, dreaming not of the town she'd left behind, but of spring thaw and what might bloom when the snow finally melted. The knock came at dawn on a bitter December morning, sharp and demanding against the cabin door. Clara jolted awake, heart racing. No one visited the mountain in winter. No one could, with the passes snowed in. She heard Ethan moving in the main room, the metallic click of him checking his rifle. Through her door, his voice carried low and cautious. Who's there? Open up, mountain man, we know she's in there. Clara recognized that voice with a sick lurch of her stomach. Her brother, Samuel. But how the passes were closed, the trail impossible. She dressed hastily and emerged to find Ethan standing by the door, rifle in hand but not aimed. His eyes found hers, a question in them. It's my brother, she whispered, and others, from the sound of it. Your choice, Ethan said simply. I can send them away, or you can hear what they have to say. Clara steeled herself. She'd made her choice months ago. Open it. The cold rushed in with 3 figures: Samuel, now 17 and trying to look fierce, their father Jonas, red-faced from the climb, and Hiram Potts, her father's brother, wearing a deputy star Clara didn't remember him having before. "Clara May," Jonas boomed. "By God, girl, you've led us a merry chase. Get your things. You're coming home." "I am home," Clara said, surprising herself with her steady voice. Samuel's eyes darted between her and Ethan. "Clara, what are you doing? The whole town's talking. They say you're living in sin with this hermit, that you've gone wild." "I'm living in peace," Clara corrected, "with a man who treats me with respect." "Respect," Jonas spat. "He bought you like a heifer at market, and now you're here doing God knows what." "Enough." Ethan's voice cut through like winter wind. "You'll speak civilly in my home or not at all." Hiram stepped forward, hand resting on his pistol. "Now see here, Boone, this is a family matter. The girl's father wants her home, and I'm here to see it done all legal-like." "Legal?" Clara laughed, sharp and bitter. "Was it legal when he tried to sell me to Pike? Where was the law then? Uncle—" "That's different," Hiram muttered. "A father's got rights over his daughter." "Not when she's a grown woman," Ethan said. "Not when she chooses to leave." Jonas's face purpled. "She's my daughter until she's married proper, and seeing as how you two ain't married, she's coming with us." "I'm not going anywhere," Clara stated, moving to stand beside Ethan. "You sold me, father, or tried to. Ethan paid your price, paid more than you asked. By your own logic, you have no claim on me." "That wasn't legal," Jonas shouted. "No proper contract, no witnesses." "Half the town witnessed it." Clara shot back. "They saw you auction me like livestock. They saw Ethan pay fairly. If you want to talk legal, let's discuss that in front of a real judge." Samuel stepped toward her, eyes pleading. "Clara, please, I know Pa done wrong, but you can't stay here. People are saying terrible things. Your reputation—" "My reputation," Clara's voice rose. "I spent 22 years being the perfect daughter. Samuel, cooking, cleaning, tending shop, never a word of complaint. What reputation did that earn me, spinster? Unwanted. Burden. At least here, I'm building something real." "Building something," Jonas sneered, looking around the simple cabin. "You're playing house with a killer who couldn't protect his own family. You think he'll protect you when trouble comes." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees, though the fire still blazed. Ethan set his rifle aside very deliberately, and somehow that made him more dangerous, not less. "Say that again," he invited quietly. Hiram's hand tightened on his pistol. "Now, nobody wants violence." "Then you shouldn't have brought it to my door," Ethan replied, eyes never leaving Jonas. "You want to insult me. May, I've been insulted by better men, but you'll not speak of my late wife and child. Not in my home, not ever." Jonas swallowed hard, some animal instinct finally recognizing the predator before him, but pride wouldn't let him back down entirely. "I'm taking my daughter. That's final." "No," Clara said, "you're not." She walked to the shelf where Ethan kept his few books and pulled down the Bible. "You want to talk about what's proper? Father, let's talk. Therefore shall a man leave his father and his mother, and shall cleave unto his wife." Isn't that what you taught me? Well, I've left, I've chosen. Maybe not in the way you wanted, but it's done. "You ain't married," Jonas roared. "Not yet," Clara agreed calmly. "But if that's what it takes to make you understand I'm not your property anymore, then so be it." The words hung in the air like frost. Everyone turned to stare at her, including Ethan. "Clara," he said carefully, "you don't have to." "I know." She met his eyes steadily. "But I'm tired of men deciding my fate based on their rules. If marriage is what makes me a free woman in their eyes, then I choose that too, if you'll have me." Ethan searched her face for a long moment. Then, slowly, he nodded. Always said you could stay as long as you wanted. Forever works just as well as any other time frame. It wasn't a romantic proposal. It wasn't meant to be. It was two people choosing alliance against a world that would grind them down separately. But Samuel saw something else in it. Something that made him surge forward. Hey, you can't, Clara. You don't know him. He's got secrets, dark ones. People in town talk about everyone. Clara cut him off. They talked about Ma when she married beneath her station. They talked about you when you ran off to chase cattle. They'll talk until the mountains fall into the sea. I'm done living my life by their gossip. Think about what Ma would say. Samuel's voice cracked, showing his youth. Clara's expression softened slightly. Ma would say that a woman should choose her own path. She chose Pa against her family's wishes. Remember, at least I'm choosing a man who sees my worth beyond cooking and cleaning. Jonas made one last attempt. If you do this, you're dead to me, dead to the family. Don't come crying home when he tires of you. I've been dead to you since the day you tried to sell me. Clara replied, This just makes it official. Hiram cleared his throat. Well then, if the lady's made her choice, Jonas, we should go. Storm's coming in, and we barely made it up as it is. But Jonas wasn't finished. His eyes glittered with malice as he looked between Clara and Ethan. Fine, stay here. Play at being married. But know this, girl, when spring comes and people can travel again. They'll come looking. Respectable folk don't take kindly to their kind mixing with ours. You've chosen a hard road. Harder than being sold to Pike, Clara asked. Harder than spending my life as your unpaid servant. At least this road is mine to walk. Samuel made one last plea. Clara, please. I came back. I was going to help you. Get you away. 2 years too late, she said, not unkindly. I'm glad you're alive, Samuel, but I don't need saving anymore. I saved myself. The three men left with the morning sun, Jonas's threats echoing off the mountain peaks. Clara and Ethan stood in the doorway, watching them struggle through the snow until they disappeared among the trees. Well, Ethan said finally, that was unexpected. Clara laughed, surprising them both. Which part them coming here or me proposing? Both, I reckon. He closed the door against the cold, turning to face her. Clara, what you said in there, you don't owe me marriage. You know that, right? Your place here isn't dependent on... I know. She met his gaze squarely. But I'm tired of half measures. Ethan, tired of waiting for permission to live my life. If marriage makes me free in the world's eyes, then I choose it. But more than that, she paused, gathering courage. I choose you. These months, working together, building something. I can't imagine going back to being alone. You honor me, Ethan said quietly. But I'm not... Clara, I'm broken. Sarah took the best parts of me when she left. What's left isn't much of a prize. You're wrong. Clara stepped closer. You're wounded, not broken. There's a difference, and you're the only man who ever looked at me and saw a person worth saving. That's prize enough for me. They stood there in the morning light, two damaged souls recognizing something in each other. Not passion, perhaps not yet, but possibility, partnership, a future neither had dared imagine. There's a traveling preacher comes through the lower valley sometimes, Ethan said eventually. Reverend Morris, come spring, we could make it proper, if you still want to. I'll want to, Clara said with certainty. But Ethan, we make our own proper, starting now. He smiled then, a real smile that took years off his weathered face. Yes, ma'am, I believe we do. Outside, the threatened storm began to roll in. But inside the cabin, something new had taken root. Not a fairy tale romance, but something stronger, a choice freely made, a partnership freely entered, a future freely claimed. Clara went to start breakfast while Ethan tended the fire, both moving in the easy rhythm they'd developed. But now there was a new awareness between them, a sense of ground shifting, of walls coming down. They'd faced her past and made their choice. Now all that remained was to build their future, one day at a time, one season at a time, together. January came with a vengeance, bringing the worst blizzard in memory. For 3 days, the snow fell so thick they couldn't see the barn from the cabin window. On the 4th morning, an ominous crack echoed across the valley, followed by a rumbling that shook the walls. "Avalanche," Ethan said grimly, peering out at the white wall where the eastern slope used to be. "Trail's gone. We're cut off completely now until spring." Clara nodded, unsurprised. After her family's visit, she'd expected winter to test them somehow. "We have enough supplies. If we're careful. But there's another problem." He gestured toward the barn. That rumbling spooked Sage. She kicked through her stall and got tangled in the broken wood. She's hurt bad. They struggled through chest-deep snow to reach the barn. The mare lay on her side, breathing hard. Her left foreleg bent at an ugly angle. Blood seeped through a gash along her flank. "Oh, Sage," Clara breathed, dropping beside the injured horse. Ethan's face was stone as he examined the leg. "It's broken, clean through." He stood slowly, reaching for the rifle he'd brought. "Wait." Clara caught his arm. "Let me try. I've helped birth foals, tended injured animals. Maybe—" "Clara," his voice was gentle but firm. "A broken leg on a horse. There's no fixing that. It's kinder to—" "Please." She met his eyes, seeing her own reflected pain there. "Give me one day, if she's no better tomorrow, or if she's suffering too much, then—" She couldn't finish the sentence. Ethan studied her face, then nodded once. "One day." They worked together to make Sage comfortable, cleaning her wounds and rigging a sling to keep weight off the broken leg. Clara stayed with the mare through the night, speaking softly, offering water and what comfort she could. Ethan came and went, bringing blankets and hot soup, never suggesting she give up. Dawn found Sage still breathing. Though her eyes were glazed with pain, Clara's hands were raw from adjusting the sling, her back screaming from the awkward position. But when she tried to stand, the mare nickered softly and tried to lift her head. "I know, girl," Clara whispered. "I know it hurts, but you're strong, stronger than they think." "How is she?" Ethan appeared with fresh water. "Alive, fighting." Clara accepted the cup he offered, grateful for the warmth. "She wants to live, Ethan. I can see it in her eyes." He crouched beside them, running a gentle hand along Sage's neck. "Sarah used to say animals know things we don't, said they could sense who needed them most." He was quiet for a moment. "Maybe Sage knows we need her to make it through this winter." It was the most hope he'd expressed since she'd met him. Clara reached over, squeezing his shoulder. "Tell me about the horses Sarah trained. Maybe there's something—" He talked through the morning, sharing memories of Cheyenne horse wisdom while they tended Sage together. By afternoon, the mare was trying to stand despite the sling. By evening, she was taking water eagerly. "I'll be damned," Ethan murmured. Tough old girl might make it after all. But their relief was short-lived. That night, Ethan woke burning with fever. Clara found him delirious, mumbling Sarah's name. His injured face from the November storm now red and swollen with infection. "No," Clara breathed, feeling his burning forehead. "Not now. Not like this." She dragged him closer to the fire, piled on blankets, and tried every remedy she knew. Willow bark tea for the fever, hot compresses for the infection, constant cooling cloths for his burning skin. But nothing helped. The fever climbed higher. "Sarah," he mumbled, reaching for someone who wasn't there. "Emma, baby, Papa's coming." Clara's eyes burned with unshed tears. She'd seen fever like this take strong men in days, sometimes hours, and they were trapped. No way to get help, no way down the mountain even if help existed. You listen to me. Ethan Boone, she said fiercely, gripping his hand. You don't get to leave. Not after everything. Not when we're just beginning to... Her voice broke. Please, stay with me. She talked through the night, telling him about her childhood, her dreams, anything to keep him anchored to this world. When he called for Sarah, she didn't correct him, just held his hand and whispered comfort. When he thrashed in delirium, she held him steady, her slight frame somehow finding strength. The second night was worse. His breathing went shallow, skin gray beneath the fever flush. Clara found herself praying to a god she'd half forgotten, bargaining for time, for mercy, for one more sunrise. You saved me, she whispered against his burning forehead. Let me save you. Please, Ethan, please. Dawn of the third day found them both exhausted. Clara could barely keep her eyes open, but she forced herself to check his wound again. The swelling had peaked and... Was that, yes, a thin line of drainage? The infection breaking. Thank God, she breathed, renewing her efforts with hot compresses. By noon, his fever broke in a great sweat that soaked through every blanket. Clara cried then, great gasping sobs of relief and exhaustion. When Ethan's eyes finally opened, clear for the first time in days, she was still crying. Clara, his voice was barely a whisper. What? You almost died, she managed between sobs. 3 days, the fever, it almost... I thought... Hey, he lifted one trembling hand to touch her face. I'm here. I'm all right. No, you're not all right. You're weak as a kitten, and we're out of medicine, and Sage is still hurt, and... Clara, his thumb brushed away her tears. Breathe. Just breathe. She did, great shuddering breaths that slowly calmed her racing heart. When she could speak again, she said, Don't ever scare me like that again. I'll try not to. He attempted a smile. Though I can't promise the mountain won't have other ideas. She helped him sit up, noting how his hands shook with the effort. You need food. Broth first, then something more substantial. In a minute. He caught her hand as she started to rise. Clara, I heard you, through the fever. You stayed with me. Of course I stayed. Where else would I go? That's not... He struggled for words. When Sarah was sick, I left just for a day, to hunt, to get fresh meat. She begged me not to go, but I thought I knew better, thought providing was more important than presence. When I came back... Ethan, no, you couldn't have known. Maybe not, but you knew. You stayed when staying was all that mattered. His gray eyes held hers. Thank you. Clara squeezed his hand. Partners, remember we take care of each other. The recovery was slow. While Ethan regained his strength, Clara tended both him and Sage, who was finally bearing weight on her injured leg. The work was exhausting, but there was something deeply satisfying about it too. This was what she'd been made for. She realized, not standing behind a counter, not being decorative and useless, but this caring for those who needed her, being needed in return. One evening, as she changed Ethan's bandages, he caught her hand. You've got healing hands. Clara May. Just farm girl hands, she corrected, but she was pleased. Nothing special about them. I disagree. He turned her palm up, tracing the calluses and scars. These hands held death at bay. That's about as special as it gets. The moment stretched between them, charged with new awareness. Clara felt her breath catch as Ethan's fingers intertwined with hers. This wasn't partnership anymore, wasn't mere alliance against the world. This was something deeper, warmer, infinitely more dangerous. Ethan, she whispered. I know, he said softly. I know I said I had nothing left to give. But Clara, these weeks, watching you fight for Sage, for me, you've wakened something I thought died with Sarah. I'm not her, Clara said quickly. I could never be. I don't want you to be. His voice was firm. Sarah was my past, a beautiful past, but past all the same. He paused, searching for words. Your possible future, if you want to be. Clara's heart hammered against her ribs. I want to be, but Ethan, I don't know how to. I've never. Neither have I, not like this. Not chosen freely by two people who've seen each other's worst and decided to stay anyway. He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm. We'll learn together, if you're willing. I'm willing, Clara breathed, and knew she'd never meant anything more. Outside, the wind howled around their small cabin, but inside, something new bloomed between them. Not the desperate passion of youth or the resigned partnership of necessity, but something rarer love grown from respect, from shared trials, from the choice to stay when leaving would be easier. They still had winter to survive, wounds to heal, a future to build. But for now, in the flickering firelight with their hands entwined, it was enough to have chosen each other. March arrived with the promise of spring, melting snow revealing the first green shoots in the meadow. Clara stood at the window, watching Ethan work with the sage in the corral. The mare's leg had healed remarkably well, though she'd always carry a slight limp. Like all of them, Clara thought, bearing scars but still standing. These past weeks since Ethan's recovery had been a dance of discovery. Small touches that lingered, glances that held meaning, conversations that ventured into deeper waters. They'd shared the same space for months, but now that space hummed with new energy, tentative and sweet. She's looking good, Clara said as Ethan entered, bringing the scent of pine and horse with him. Strong as ever, just a bit slower. He hung his coat by the door, a gesture so domestic it made Clara's heart clench. Reverend Morris sent word. He'll be in the lower valley next week. Clara's hands stilled on the bread she was kneading. They'd spoken of marriage through the winter, but somehow next week seemed both too soon and not soon enough. If you've changed your mind, Ethan began. No. She turned to face him, flour dusting her hands. No, I haven't changed my mind. Have you? He crossed to her in 3 strides, cradling her face in his work-worn hands. Never. But Clara, you need to understand what you're choosing. The isolation, the hard work, the man who sees me, she interrupted. The life I've built with my own hands. The freedom to choose. That's what I'm choosing. Ethan. He kissed her then, soft and careful, as if she might break. Clara made a sound of frustration and pulled him closer, showing him she was no fragile thing. When they parted, both breathing hard, his eyes held wonder. You're going to be the death of me, Clara May. Better me than a fever, she said, making him laugh. That evening, they sat by the fire planning their trip to the lower valley. It was the first time Clara would leave the mountains since arriving, and the thought filled her with unexpected anxiety. What if people from town are there? She asked. What if my father? Then we face them together. Ethan said simply, You're not alone anymore. Remember. She leaned into his solid warmth. I'm still getting used to that. So am I. He pressed a kiss to her hair. Worth getting used to, though. 2 nights later, Clara woke to find Ethan's side of the main room empty. She pulled on her shawl and found him standing on the porch, staring at the star-filled sky. Couldn't sleep, she asked softly. Dreams, he admitted, not turning. Sarah and Emma, they were saying goodbye. Clara's chest tightened. Ethan. Not like that. He finally looked at her, eyes bright with unshed tears. They were smiling. Sarah told me it was time to let go, that holding on to grief was just another kind of death. He laughed shakily. Even in dreams, she was always the wiser one. Clara took his hand, intertwining their fingers. She loved you. She'd want you happy. I know. That's what makes it hard. Being happy feels like betrayal sometimes. No, Clara said firmly. Being happy honors them. It says their love mattered enough to teach you how to love again. He pulled her close then, burying his face in her hair. They stood like that for long minutes, wrapped in darkness and each other, while the mountains stood witness to grief transforming into something new. The next morning brought unexpected visitors. Clara heard the horses first, her body tensing with memory of her father's visit. But Ethan, peering out the window, relaxed. It's Ben McCready and his wife, neighbors from the next valley. The McCreadys were a weathered couple in their 50s, faces carved by mountain living but kind around the eyes. They'd brought fresh supplies and news from the lower settlements. Heard you might be heading down for the Reverend, Ben said, accepting coffee gratefully. Thought we'd ride along. Safety in numbers. And all. Besides, Mary McCready added, eyes twinkling as she looked between Ethan and Clara. Been too long since we had a wedding to celebrate. About time Ethan Boone found someone to share that cabin with. Clara blushed, but Ethan just smiled. Clara's the one doing the sharing. I'm just grateful she's willing. Over the meal, the McCreadys shared news from the outside world. The railroad was pushing further west, bringing changes both good and bad. There'd been Indian troubles to the south, though the local bands remained peaceful. And yes, there'd been talk about Ethan's bought bride in town. But most folks figured it was none of their business what happened in the mountains. Your father made some noise, Ben admitted to Clara, but Pike's been run out of town for other reasons. Seems he was watering his whiskey and cheating at cards. Your father lost his backing when that came out. Clara felt a weight she hadn't known she carried lift from her shoulders. Not vindication exactly, but a kind of rough justice that suited the frontier. That night, as they prepared for bed in their separate spaces, Ethan caught Clara's hand. Tomorrow we go down. Day after, if Morris is there, we marry. You ready for that? I've been ready since December, Clara admitted. Since you chose to stay. Since you let me choose to stay. Then why do you look scared? Clara considered her words carefully. Because wanting something this much makes it precious. And precious things can break. Not us, Ethan said with quiet conviction. We've already been broken and mended. That makes us stronger, not weaker. She kissed him then, pouring all her hope and fear and love into the gesture. When they parted, his eyes were dark with promise. Day after tomorrow, he said roughly. Then you're mine, Clara May. I'm already yours, she whispered. Have been since you taught me I was worth $40 in pelts. Worth everything, he corrected. Worth all of it. They parted reluctantly, aware of the McCreadys' presence and the proprieties that still mattered, even here. But Clara lay awake long into the night, hand pressed to her lips, feeling the echo of his kiss and the promise of what was to come. The morning of departure dawned clear and bright. Clara packed carefully her good dress, saved for this occasion, and the new clothes that had seen her through winter. Everything she owned fit in 2 bags. But somehow that seemed right. She was traveling light into her new life, carrying only what mattered. Ready? Ethan asked, helping her onto Sage. The mare, despite her limp, seemed eager for the journey. Ready? Clara said, and meant it. They rode out as the sun climbed higher, the McCreadys' cheerful company on the trail. Below them, the valley opened up like a promise, green and gold in the spring light. Behind them, the cabin waited, patient as the mountains, ready to welcome them home. No second thoughts, Mary McCready asked, riding beside Clara as the men talked ahead. None, Clara said firmly. For the first time in my life, I know exactly where I belong. Good, Mary smiled. Ethan's been alone too long. He needs someone strong enough to match him. Seems to me he found her. They camped that night under stars so bright they seemed touchable. Clara lay beside the fire, listening to Ethan's steady breathing nearby. The soft sounds of horses grazing, the distant call of night birds. Tomorrow would bring change vows spoken, lives officially joined. the world's recognition of what they'd already chosen. But tonight, suspended between past and future, Clara felt perfectly content. She'd traveled far from the frightened woman who'd stood in Bitter Creek's dusty street, priced like cattle. That woman could never have imagined this love chosen freely, a partner who saw her strength, a life built on mutual respect rather than obligation. "Thank you," she whispered to the stars, to the mountains, to whatever fate had brought her here. Beside her, Ethan stirred. "Can't sleep." "Too happy," she admitted, making him chuckle. "Come here," he said, opening his arms. She went. Propriety be damned. They lay together under the vast sky, her head on his chest, his arms around her, both fully clothed but more intimate than she'd ever been with another soul. "Tell me it's real," she whispered. "Tell me I won't wake up back in my father's house." "It's real," he assured her, pressing his lips to her hair. "Real as the mountains, real as spring water, real as my love for you." It was the first time he'd said the word. Clara's breath caught, tears pricking her eyes. "I love you too," she managed. "So much it scares me." "Don't be scared," he murmured. "We've got time now. All the time we need to get used to being happy." They fell asleep like that, wrapped in each other and the promise of tomorrow. Above them, the stars wheeled on their ancient paths, blessing the small miracles that bloom when broken people choose to heal together. Tomorrow would bring witnesses and vows, the Reverend's words and the world's acknowledgement. But tonight, under the watching sky, they were already married in every way that mattered, two souls who'd found home in each other, against all odds and expectations. "Don't you dare pull out," Clara murmured in her sleep, unconsciously pressing closer to Ethan's warmth. Half awake, he tightened his arms around her. "This is where I belong," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion, hands trembling slightly as they held her safe. The stars above seemed to pulse brighter for a moment, as if the universe itself recognized the sacred weight of promises made by those who truly understand their cost. The wedding took place beneath a canopy of pine boughs, with wildflowers Clara had gathered that morning woven through the branches. Reverend Morris, a kindly man with silver hair and gentle eyes, had agreed to perform the ceremony at the edge of the lower valley, where the mountain met the meadow. Clara wore her good dress, the same one she'd worn the day Ethan bought her freedom, now transformed by Mary McCready's skilled hands, with new lace at the collar and cuffs. Ethan had trimmed his beard and donned his only suit, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Dearly beloved," Reverend Morris began, his voice carrying across the small gathering. Besides the McCreadys, 3 other mountain families had come, drawn by the novelty of a wedding and the chance for community in their isolated lives. Clara barely heard the traditional words. Her eyes were locked on Ethan's, seeing there the same wonder she felt. When it came time for vows, Ethan spoke first, his voice steady and clear. "Clara May, you came into my life when I'd forgotten how to hope. You showed me that broken doesn't mean worthless, that choosing to love again isn't betrayal but courage. I promise to provide for you, protect you, and more than that, to see you, always, as the woman who chose to stay when staying was hard. I promise to build our life together, one day at a time, one season at a time, for all the seasons God grants us." Clara's eyes filled with tears, but her voice was strong. "Ethan Boone, you gave me freedom when I'd never known it existed. You showed me I was worth more than the price others put on me. I promise to stand beside you through blizzards and spring thaws, through grief and joy, through whatever the mountain sends our way. I promise to be your partner, your friend, your wife, not because I have to, but because I choose to, every day, for all our days." "The rings?" Reverend Morris asked. Ethan produced 2 simple bands carved from elk antler during the long winter nights when Clara didn't know he was working on them. "They're not much," he murmured. "They're perfect," Clara whispered back. when Reverend Morris pronounced them husband and wife. Ethan kissed her with a tenderness that made the watching women sigh and the men clear their throats. Clara felt the world shift and settle into a new pattern, one where she belonged completely. The celebration was simple but joyful. Mary McCready had brought a cake, somehow managing to transport it intact up the mountain trails. The other families contributed dishes, and soon they had a feast spread on makeshift tables. Someone produced a fiddle, and despite the uneven ground, dancing broke out. "May I?" Ethan asked formally, extending his hand to Clara. She laughed, delighted. "I don't know how to dance." "Neither do I. We'll learn together." They moved awkwardly at first, but soon found their rhythm, swaying together while the mountains watched and their new community cheered. Clara felt Ethan's hand trembling slightly where it rested on her waist, and loved him all the more for his nervousness. As the sun began to sink, the families gradually took their leave, each pressing small gifts into Clara's hands: preserved foods, seeds for a garden, a quilt pieced from scraps. The generosity overwhelmed her. "Is it always like this?" she asked Mary McCready. "The way people help each other?" "In the mountains, yes," Mary replied. "We're all we have out here. Today you helped us remember that joy still exists, that new beginnings are possible. That's gift enough." Finally, as stars began to appear, Clara and Ethan made their own farewells. They would camp once more on the trail, then return to their cabin, their home, in the morning. "Wait," Ben McCready called as they prepared to leave. "Almost forgot." He produced a package wrapped in oilcloth. "Wedding gift from all of us. Don't open it till you're home." They rode in comfortable silence as darkness fell, making camp in a sheltered grove. The wedding feast had left them both too full and content for their usual simple meal, so they sat by the fire. Clara nestled against Ethan's chest. "How does it feel?" she asked. "Being married again?" "Different," he said after a moment. "With Sarah, we were so young. Everything was discovery and passion and racing toward a future we could barely imagine. This," he paused, searching for words. "This feels like coming home after a long, cold journey, like finding shelter I didn't know I was looking for. For me, it's like breathing freely for the first time." Clara said, "No more wondering what I'm worth or where I belong. I know now." They consummated their marriage there under the stars, with tenderness and patience, each conscious of the gift they were giving and receiving. Later, wrapped in blankets and each other, they watched the fire burn low. "No regrets?" Ethan asked softly. "Only one," Clara said, making him tense. "I wish we'd found each other sooner." He relaxed, pressing a kiss to her temple. "We found each other when we were meant to, when we were ready." The next morning brought their return to the cabin. Everything looked the same, yet different. The morning light seemed warmer, the mountains more welcoming, the simple structure more clearly home than ever before. "Welcome home, Mrs. Boone," Ethan said, helping her down from Sage. "I like the sound of that," Clara admitted, then remembered the package. "Should we open Ben's gift?" Inside the oilcloth were tools specifically: teaching supplies, slate tablets, chalk, a few precious books, and a note in Mary's careful hand. "For the school you'll surely start, the mountains need teachers, and we suspect you both have much to teach." Clara's eyes filled. How did they know? "Mountain folk see things," Ethan said, but he looked pleased. "Would you want that to teach?" "Would you?" He considered. "Maybe, if we did it together. If we taught what matters: reading, writing, but also survival, respect, how to see people as people." A ghost of his old pain crossed his face. "Not the lies I used to tell." "Then we'll teach truth," Clara said firmly. "When we're ready, when the time is right." They spent the day settling back in. the cabin feeling properly theirs now in a way it hadn't before. That evening, as Clara prepared their first meal as husband and wife, children's voices carried from down the trail. Mrs. Boone, Mr. Boone. Two small figures appeared, the Hartley children from the gathering, carrying a basket. Ma sent bread, the older boy said shyly. And Pa said to tell you he'd help with building a schoolroom come summer, if you're willing. Clara exchanged glances with Ethan. Word traveled fast in the mountains. Tell your PA we're grateful, Ethan said, and if your ma's willing, you could come for lessons once a week, until we get a proper school built. The children's faces lit up before they scampered away, and Clara felt a new future taking shape. Not just survival now, but community, purpose. The chance to give others what they'd given each other, the freedom to choose, the dignity of learning, the respect of being seen. From traded woman to teacher, Clara mused as they ate. Strange journey. Best journey, Ethan corrected. And it's just beginning. That night, in the bed they now shared openly, Clara traced the scars on Ethan's chest, old wounds from his life before, the newer one from the storm, and marveled at the path that had brought them together. I used to hate my life, she confessed. Hate my father for seeing me as worthless. Hate the town for agreeing with him. Hate myself for not being enough. And now? Now I'm grateful, because all of that led me here, led me to you. Ethan caught her hand, holding it over his heart. Sarah used to say that pain was just life's way of preparing us for joy, that we couldn't recognize happiness without having known sorrow. His voice grew thick. I thought I'd never understand what she meant. Now I do. They made love again, slower this time, savoring the luxury of belonging to each other fully. Afterward, Clara lay listening to Ethan's heartbeat, feeling the solid reality of him, of them, of this life they were building. A year ago, she'd been property to be bartered. 6 months ago, she'd been a refugee fleeing an impossible situation. Now she was Clara Boone, wife, partner, future teacher, mountain woman. The transformation seemed impossible. Yet here she was. What are you thinking? Ethan murmured, half asleep. How far we've come. How far we still have to go. How glad I am to be going there with you. Forever journey. He agreed drowsily. Best kind. Spring moved toward summer, bringing new growth and new challenges. They planted Clara's first mountain garden with seeds from the wedding gifts. The schoolroom began to take shape with help from neighbors. 3 families committed to sending their children for lessons. On the anniversary of the day Ethan bought her freedom, Clara stood in the doorway of their cabin, watching him work with sage in the meadow. The mare was fully healed now, her limp barely noticeable, like all of them scarred but strong, marked by struggle but not defined by it. You coming? Ethan called. These children won't teach themselves. Clara laughed, gathering her teaching supplies. 5 students would arrive soon, eager for learning despite the long ride. She and Ethan would teach together reading, writing, numbers, but also deeper lessons about dignity, respect, and the radical idea that every person had inherent worth. As she joined her husband in preparing the makeshift classroom, Clara thought about the woman she'd been in Bitter Creek. That frightened, trapped creature could never have imagined this love, purpose, community, freedom. Yet here it all was, built from choice and courage and the revolutionary act of seeing people as fully human. Ready? Ethan asked, smiling at her with those winter sky eyes that had first offered her hope. Ready? Clara confirmed, and together they walked toward their future, hand in hand beneath the endless mountain sky. The cabin stood behind them, solid and welcoming, no longer just Ethan's refuge or Clara's escape, but their home, the place where broken people had chosen wholeness, where loneliness had transformed into love, where 2 souls had discovered that the greatest freedom wasn't in being alone, but in choosing who to be bound to. And in the years to come, when their students asked how they'd met, Clara would tell them the truth that sometimes the worst moments of our lives are really the beginning of our best ones, that love couldn't be bought or sold, only chosen, and that everyone, no matter their past or their price tag, deserved the chance to choose their own worth. The mountains stood eternal witness to their story, and the wind carried whispers of hope to other trapped souls. Freedom exists. Love endures. And sometimes, just sometimes, fairy tales come true, not the pretty lies, but the harder, truer stories of people who save each other by learning to save themselves. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. I hope Clara and Ethan's journey touched your heart as much as it touched mine while sharing it. Please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I love connecting with listeners around the world and hearing your thoughts on these frontier tales. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe to Wild West Night, give this video a like, and hit that hype button to help more people discover these stories of love, courage, and redemption in the American frontier. Until next time, partners.